The stars twinkled peacefully in the vast expanse of space as Commander Hannah Park watched from the bridge of the UES Starfire. Her dark eyes reflected the holographic displays surrounding her command station, hands clasped tightly behind her back, a habit she'd developed during her 15 years of service. The ship's bridge hummed with the quiet efficiency of a well-trained crew, but there was an undercurrent of tension that made the air feel thick and heavy. Lieutenant Kim's fingers danced across his console as new data streamed in. His normally composed face showed signs of strain as he processed the incoming information. The massive alien vessels had appeared without warning, emerging from what appeared to be tiers in space itself. They were unlike anything humanity had encountered before. Their hulls seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making them look like holes in the fabric of space. "Commander," Kim called out, his voice steady despite the situation. "We're detecting more ships. They're forming some kind of pattern around the solar system." Hannah moved closer to the main display, watching as red dots appeared one after another, forming a sphere around humanity's home system. The Kordathi ships were massive, each one nearly the size of Earth's moon. As they moved into position, strange energy readings began to spike on their sensors. "What are they doing?" she asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. The response came moments later as streams of dark energy began to flow between the alien vessels. The effect was beautiful in a terrifying way, like watching a spider web being woven across the stars. Within hours, the entire solar system was enclosed in a shimmering barrier of unknown energy. "Message incoming," announced Communications Officer Ryu. "It's being broadcast on all frequencies in multiple human languages." "Put it through," Hannah ordered, straightening her uniform. The holographic display shifted, showing a being that barely looked real. The Kordathi representative had skin that seemed to shift colors like oil on water, with multiple sets of eyes arranged in a pattern that human minds found difficult to process. "People of Earth," the alien's voice was surprisingly melodious, translated perfectly into English. "We are the Kordathi Consortium, and we have come to claim what is ours by right of superior civilization. Your species has been evaluated and found lacking in galactic standards. You will surrender all colonial holdings, resource rights, and submit to consortium authority. Resistance is not advised." Lieutenant Kim's console beeped urgently. "Commander, they're sending us a countdown. 24 Earth hours to submit our response." Hannah's jaw clenched so tight she could hear her teeth grind. The Kordathi had made a critical error in their calculations. They might have superior technology, might have them surrounded, but they had fundamentally misunderstood something about the human spirit. "Open a channel to Earth Command," she ordered. "Priority Alpha." The screen shifted to show Admiral Lee's office, where organized chaos reigned. Staff officers moved quickly in the background, and the Admiral himself looked like he hadn't slept in days. His weathered face showed concern but not fear. "Commander Park," he acknowledged, "I assume you're seeing what we're seeing." "Yes, sir. The Kordathi have us completely encased in some kind of energy barrier. They're demanding total surrender." Lee's expression hardened. "They'll be waiting a long time for that. We've been preparing for something like this for decades, since the first hints of alien civilization reached our telescopes." "Sir," Hannah asked, surprised by this revelation. "Commander, I'm activating Protocol Omega. Your ship will be essential to what comes next. Stand by for new orders, and delete this conversation from your logs." The transmission cut off, leaving Hannah standing in silence for a moment. Around her, her crew continued their work, monitoring the barrier and the alien ships. She could see the fear in their eyes, but also determination. Humanity had spread across the solar system, built colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter, survived countless disasters and setbacks. They hadn't come this far to submit to alien demands. "Lieutenant Kim," she said firmly, "begin full combat readiness protocols. I want every weapon system checked and double-checked. Officer Rio, monitor all frequencies for any communications between those ships. If they so much as sneeze, I want to know about it." As her crew acknowledged their orders, Hannah turned back to the main display. The barrier shimmered like a soap bubble around their entire solar system, beautiful and terrifying. The Cordathi thought they had humanity trapped, cornered like animals in a cage. They were about to learn just how dangerous cornered animals could be. "Send a message to all ships in our battle group," Hannah ordered. Code phrase: "The stars are watching." She knew that across the solar system, other commanders were receiving similar messages. Whatever protocol Omega was, humanity wasn't going down without a fight. The next 24 hours would determine the fate of their species. But as Hannah watched her crew work, saw the determination in their eyes and the strength in their movements, she felt a fierce pride. The Cordathi had made their first mistake. They had given humanity time to prepare. Their second mistake had been assuming humanity would ever surrender. Commander Hannah Park had never seen anything quite like the facility hidden beneath the Gangwon Mountains. The massive underground chamber stretched for kilometers, carved deep into the ancient rock. Artificial lighting cast everything in a harsh white glow, reflecting off the polished surfaces of 3 ships unlike any she had ever encountered. Dr. Song walked beside her, his steps quick and precise despite his age. The scientist's eyes gleamed with barely contained excitement as he led the group through the facility. Behind them, Lieutenant Kim and a select group from the Starfire's crew followed, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. "We've been working on Project Sunrise for 15 years, Dr. Song explained, his voice carrying the weight of countless sleepless nights and endless calculations. "When the first hints of advanced alien civilizations reached our telescopes, we knew we needed something different, something they wouldn't expect." The closest ship loomed before them, its hull a strange, shifting pattern of blacks and silvers. Unlike the practical, angular designs of most human vessels, this one seemed to flow like liquid metal frozen in time. Hannah could see no visible weapons, no traditional engine ports. The key was understanding that traditional weapons would be useless. Dr. Song continued, placing his hand against the hull. Any civilization capable of crossing the stars would have defenses against conventional attacks. We needed something fundamental, something tied to the very nature of stars themselves. He led them to a control room overlooking all 3 ships. Holographic displays sprang to life, showing complex diagrams that made Hannah's head spin. But Dr. Song simplified it, breaking down the revolutionary technology into terms they could grasp. Every star produces radiation, a constant stream of energy that shapes the space around it. We found a way to replicate that energy, to concentrate it into something we could control. The pulse drives don't just mimic solar radiation. They amplify it, focus it like a lens focusing sunlight. Lieutenant Kim stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. "The Cordathi barrier. It's some kind of energy field. You think this can break through?" "Better than that," Dr. Song smiled. "Their barrier technology works by creating a stable energy matrix. But nothing in nature is truly stable. Everything has a resonance frequency. Hit the right note, and even the strongest structure will shatter." Hannah watched as simulations played out on the screens. The pulse technology created waves of energy that looked like ripples in a pond, but these ripples carried the power of a solar flare. "We've named the ships," Dr. Song said proudly. "Dawn, Daybreak, and Aurora. Each one is slightly different, allowing us to test different approaches. The pulse technology is untested in actual combat conditions, but our simulations show a 70% chance of success." "And the other 30%? Hannah asked quietly. Dr. Song's expression grew serious. "Total ship destruction. The energy we're dealing with. It's not forgiving of mistakes." The weight of what they were attempting settled over the room. 3 ships. 3 chances to break through a barrier created by a civilization far more advanced than their own. The lives of every crew member would depend on calculations and theories that had never been tested in real conditions. "Show me how it works," Hannah demanded. "If we're going to pilot these ships, we need to understand every detail." The next several hours were intense. Dr. Song and his team explained the intricacies of the pulse drives, the special shielding required to protect the crew, the precise timing needed to generate the maximum effect. The technology was revolutionary, but it required perfect execution. The first ship launches in 12 hours, Dr. Song concluded. Dawn will make the initial attempt. If it fails, he trailed off, letting the implications hang in the air. Hannah stood at the observation window, looking down at the three ships that represented humanity's best hope. They gleamed under the artificial lights, beautiful and deadly. Somewhere above them, the Cordethi waited, confident in their superiority, certain of their victory. "We'll need volunteer crews," she said finally. "The risk." "Already have them," Lieutenant Kim interrupted. Every pilot and engineer in the facility volunteered the moment they heard about the mission. "We're not short on courage, Commander." Dr. Song nodded approvingly. "The Cordethi think they have us trapped. They don't understand that humanity's greatest achievements have always come when our backs are against the wall." Hannah thought of the barrier surrounding Earth, of the ultimatum that ticked away like a countdown to extinction. But here, deep under the mountains, humanity had built something extraordinary, a weapon born not from hatred or fear, but from understanding the fundamental forces of the universe itself. "Begin pre-launch preparations," she ordered. "I want every system checked and rechecked. We get one chance at this. Let's make it count." As her crew dispersed to their assignments, Hannah remained at the window, watching as teams began swarming around Dawn. In 12 hours, they would know if humanity had a fighting chance. In 12 hours, they would either break through the barrier or... She pushed the thought aside. The stars themselves had given them the key to their salvation. Now they just had to use it. Yuna wiped the rock dust from her hands and adjusted her worn mining suit, looking just like any other asteroid belt worker heading home after a long shift. No one paid attention to the small woman with tired eyes as she made her way through the crowded corridors of Mining Station Delta. That was exactly how she wanted it. The real work began after she entered her quarters, a tiny module like hundreds of others attached to the station's outer ring. She pressed her palm against a hidden scanner, and a section of the wall slid aside to reveal her true command center. Screens lit up automatically, showing the positions of every belt runner ship and safe house in their growing network. "Status report," she said quietly. The computer recognized her voice, and encrypted communications began streaming in from across the asteroid belt. What had started as a loose collection of miners and transporters had grown into something much more. A resistance network that stretched from Mercury's orbit to the moons of Jupiter. Her second-in-command, Minnow, appeared on one of the screens. Like many belt runners, he'd once been a legitimate cargo pilot before the Cordethi blockade changed everything. "We lost contact with Team 7, he reported, his face grim. They were mapping fluctuations near Sector 47 when their signals went dark. Yuna closed her eyes for a moment, adding 3 more names to the list of those they'd lost. The work was dangerous. Studying the Cordethi barrier meant getting close to it, and the aliens didn't hesitate to fire on any ship that ventured too near. "Did they transmit their data first?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Every belt runner knew to transmit continuously, ensuring no discovery would be wasted if the worst happened. "Yes, the patterns match what we've seen in other sectors. The barrier weakens during solar storms, creating gaps about 3 kilometers wide. They last anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes. Yuna pulled up the compiled data on her main screen. Hundreds of observations from different points around the solar system formed a pattern, one that might just save humanity. The Cordethi's seemingly perfect blockade had a flaw, one written into the very nature of their technology. A quiet chime alerted her to visitors. Through her security feeds, she saw 3 familiar faces waiting at her door, belt runners who had proven themselves trustworthy. She activated the entry protocols, and soon they joined her in the hidden command center. "The mining companies are starting to ask questions," said Jin, a stocky man who coordinated their supply lines. They've noticed their ore shipments are carrying less than they should. Let them ask, Yuna replied. As long as they get paid, most of them don't care what we do with the extra cargo space. She brought up a map showing their supply network. Dozens of mining ships move between the asteroids, each one carrying a little less ore and a little more of what the resistance needed. Fuel, parts, weapons carefully hidden among the rocks. What about the new intel? Asked Dara, their best pilot. Is it worth the lives we lost? Yuna expanded the display, showing the complex web of data they'd gathered. Look here, she pointed to a particular pattern. The barrier doesn't just weaken randomly during solar storms. There's a predictable cycle. If we can time it right, if we can coordinate with the right kind of ships. She let the implication hang in the air. They all knew about the pulse ships being built in secret bases across the solar system. The Belt Runners' mission wasn't just to gather intelligence. They were creating the supply lines and safe harbors those ships would need. We need to expand our network, Yuna decided. Push deeper into the outer system. The Kordathi are watching the inner planets, but they pay less attention out here. They think we're just simple miners trying to survive. That underestimation was humanity's greatest advantage. The aliens saw the asteroid belt as nothing more than a collection of rocks and primitive mining operations. They didn't understand how years of survival in one of the harshest environments had prepared humans for exactly this kind of fight. 3 more teams are ready for training, Minho reported. Former miners and ice haulers. Good people who know how to keep their mouths shut. Yuna nodded. Every new belt runner was a calculated risk, but they needed more eyes watching the barrier, more ships mapping its weaknesses. Start them on the outer routes. Low risk, until we know we can trust them completely. She turned back to the display showing their latest losses. Team 7's final transmission had given them crucial data about the barrier's behavior. Their sacrifice, like so many others, would help ensure humanity's survival. The Kordathi think they've trapped us, she said quietly. They don't realize they've just made space itself our ally. Every asteroid, every chunk of rock, every shadow in the belt. They're all part of our network now. Her team nodded in understanding. They were no longer just miners and pilots. They had become something more, the hidden eyes and hands of humanity's resistance, working in the shadows between the stars. Get some rest, she told them. Tomorrow we start expanding the network. The pulse ships will need our help when they make their move, and we'll be ready. As her team filed out, Yuna turned back to her screens, watching the countless dots of ships and stations moving through the belt. Somewhere out there, Team 7's ship drifted silently, another marker of the price they were paying for freedom. But their sacrifice, like all the others, would not be in vain. The Belt Runners would make sure of that. The bridge of the UES Starfire hummed with barely contained energy as Commander Hannah Park watched the tactical display. 20 ships hung in formation around her, their pulse drives casting an eerie blue glow against the darkness of space. Dr. Song stood at a specially installed console, his fingers dancing across the controls as he monitored the complex energy readings. Solar flare approaching optimal position. Lieutenant Kim reported, his voice steady despite the tension. 7 minutes until maximum effect. Hannah nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. Every ship in their formation carried a modified version of the pulse drive technology. The first 3 test ships had proved the concept worked, though Dawn had been lost in the attempt. Now they had gathered every vessel they could retrofit in time, preparing for one coordinated strike. Belt runner signals confirmed, Officer Rayo announced. They're reporting Kordathi patrol patterns exactly as predicted. The target sector will be clear for approximately 3 minutes. The Kordathi had grown complacent in the weeks since establishing their blockade. Their patrols had become routine, predictable. They never suspected the humans had been studying their every move, looking for precisely this kind of opportunity. Energy readings from the barrier are starting to fluctuate, Dr. Song called out, excitement creeping into his usually calm voice. The solar flare is having the exact effect we predicted. The resonance patterns are becoming unstable. Hannah opened a channel to the fleet. All ships, this is Commander Park. Begin final approach vectors. Remember your training. One mistake in the formation, and the entire attack fails. She watched as the ships moved into position, forming a precise geometric pattern that had taken weeks to calculate. Each vessel had to hit the barrier at exactly the right point, with exactly the right energy frequency. Like a massive tuning fork, they would strike a chord that would shatter the Kordathi's supposedly impenetrable defense. 4 minutes to optimal position, Kim updated. Kordathi patrols maintaining their current course. Dr. Song's console beeped urgently. Commander, the solar flare is stronger than we anticipated. It could affect our shields. Can we adjust? Hannah asked, knowing how precarious their timing was. No time. We'll have to risk it. The stronger flare might actually help. It's creating more instability in the barrier than we hoped for. Hannah took a deep breath. They had trained for this, prepared for every contingency they could think of. Now it came down to timing and courage. All ships, power up pulse drives. Synchronize on my mark. She watched the status indicators turn green one by one as each ship reported ready. Target point locked. Remember, we hit as one. The barrier may try to adapt. Don't break formation, no matter what happens. The seconds ticked by with agonizing slowness. The solar flare's energy washed over them in waves, making the ship's shields crackle. On the main display, the barrier shimmered with strange patterns, its energy field disturbed by the natural forces they had learned to predict. 30 seconds. Kim called out. Kordathi patrols are exactly where we want them. Pulse drives at full power, Dr. Song reported. Resonance frequencies matched across all ships. Hannah gripped her command chair tightly. Everything they had worked for came down to this moment. All ships, this is Commander Park. Execute pattern Omega on my mark. The bridge fell silent except for the humming of the pulse drives. Hannah counted down in her head, watching the tactical display as all the elements aligned perfectly. Mark. 20 ships surged forward as one, their pulse drives creating a web of energy between them. The barrier loomed ahead, its surface rippling like water in a storm. Dr. Song called out readings rapid fire as they approached the point of no return. Impact in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The combined energy of 20 pulse drives struck the barrier at exactly the same point. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing seemed to happen. The barrier absorbed the attack just as it had absorbed everything else humanity had thrown at it. Then a note like crystal breaking echoed through space. The barrier's surface began to splinter, cracks of pure energy spreading outward from the point of impact. The Starfire's hull groaned as conflicting forces pulled at it. Hold formation, Hannah ordered as several ships began to drift. Pour everything into the pulse drives. Don't let up. Dr. Song's console was screaming warnings, but his face showed pure joy. It's working. The resonance is cascading through their entire energy matrix. With a silent flash that lit up space like a new sun, the barrier shattered. Fragments of energy scattered in all directions, dissipating into the void. Through the gap, Hannah could see open space. True, unblocked space, for the first time in weeks. All ships, report status, she commanded. One by one, the vessels checked in. They had lost power to some systems, and their shields were nearly depleted, but every ship had survived. They had done it. They had broken through. Kordathi vessels are responding, Kim reported urgently. Their patrol squadrons are changing course. Hannah allowed herself a small smile. Too late. Send the signal to all Earth forces. Operation Daybreak is go. The Kordathi are about to learn what happens when you cage humanity. The gap they had created wouldn't last long, but it didn't need to. Other strike groups were already moving into position, ready to create their own breaches. The Kordathi's perfect blockade had been proven vulnerable, and humanity would push through every crack until it shattered completely. "Take us through," Hannah ordered. "Let's show them what else these pulse drives can do." The Starfire led the fleet through the gap, 20 ships flying proud into open space. Behind them, the barrier was already trying to repair itself, but it didn't matter. They had proved it could be broken, and that was just the beginning. The first contact with the Nairi happened in the darkness beyond Neptune's orbit. Commander Hannah Park stood on the Starfire's bridge, watching as the alien vessels emerged from what looked like tears in the fabric of space itself. Unlike the harsh, angular ships of the Cordathi, these vessels seemed alive, their hulls flowing and shifting like liquid metal mixed with crystal. No weapons signatures detected, Lieutenant Kim reported, though his hand stayed near the pulse drive controls. After breaking through the Cordathi blockade, they had learned to be cautious. Their energy readings are strange. "I've never seen anything like this." The largest of the Nairi ships approached slowly, its surface rippling with patterns of light that seemed to form and dissolve like thoughts made visible. A transmission reached them, carrying both audio and visual data in a format their computers somehow understood perfectly. The beam that appeared on their main screen took Hannah's breath away. The Nairi were clearly not human, but there was something hauntingly beautiful about them. The representative's form seemed to shift between solid and ethereal, with crystalline structures that caught and reflected light in impossible ways. "We are the Nairi." The alien's voice came through clearly, translated into perfect English. "I am called Dawn Singer in your tongue. We have watched your battle against the Cordathi with great interest." Hannah straightened her uniform, very aware that she was humanity's representative in this moment. "I am Commander Hannah Park of the United Earth ship Starfire. We're honored to meet you." "The honor is ours," Dawn Singer replied. "We have witnessed how your people shattered the barrier, something no other species has achieved in the 1,000 years of Cordathi dominance. Your pulse technology, it is remarkable." The praise seemed genuine, but Hannah remained cautious. "You know of the Cordathi." "All too well." The crystal structures in Dawn Singer's form darkened slightly. "They came to our worlds 3 centuries ago. Many of our colonies still suffer under their rule. We have fought them, but their energy barriers have always proved too strong." Understanding dawned on Hannah. "You've been watching us to see if we found a way through." "Yes, and you have succeeded where all others failed, but the Cordathi will adapt. They will modify their barriers to resist your pulse technology, unless—" Dawn Singer's form shifted, and a holographic display appeared between them. It showed complex energy patterns that made Hannah's head spin until she recognized elements of their own pulse drive technology. "Your pulse drives create focused energy that mimics solar radiation," Dawn Singer explained. "Our phase shields can bend space itself, creating pockets where normal physics don't apply. Together, they would be unstoppable." Dr. Song finished, having entered the bridge during the conversation. His eyes were wide with excitement as he studied the Nairi's technical data. "The pulse drives could create the energy, and your phase shields could direct it in ways the Cordathi could never predict or block." Hope began to build in Hannah's chest, but she forced herself to remain practical. "Why help us? Why now?" "Because you have proven yourselves worthy," Dawn Singer replied simply. "The Cordathi believe themselves superior to all other life. They see beauty and creativity as weaknesses, but we have watched how your people adapted, how you turned the very stars themselves into weapons. You understand what they never will, that true strength comes from harmony with the universe, not dominance over it." The Nairi's words resonated with something deep in Hannah's soul. She thought of how humanity had studied solar flares and stellar radiation, learning to work with natural forces rather than against them. It was so different from the Cordathi's brute force approach. "How many other species have they enslaved?" she asked quietly. "Too many. But that can change. Your pulse technology and our phase shields are just the beginning. We know of others who would join us, who have waited for a chance to break free." The Cordathi's power is built on fear and isolation. They keep each species separate, afraid, alone. Together, we can change that. Hannah looked at her crew, saw the hope and determination in their eyes. They had broken through the blockade, but that was just one battle. With allies like the Nairi, they could win the war. "We'll need to contact Earth Command," she said. "Arrange formal meetings, establish protocols." Of course, Dawn Singer's form brightened. "But first, perhaps your engineers would like to see our phase shield technology, and we are very eager to learn more about your pulse drives." Dr. Song looked like a child on Christmas morning. "Commander." Hannah nodded, allowing herself to smile. "Set up a technical exchange, but maintain standard security protocols. Trust is earned slowly." "As it should be," Dawn Singer agreed. "We have much to learn from each other, and time grows short. The Cordathi will not stay blind to our meeting for long." As teams of human engineers prepared to visit the Nairi ship, Hannah watched the alien vessels shimmer against the star field. For the first time since the blockade began, she felt more than just determination. She felt real hope. The Cordathi had tried to isolate humanity, to break their spirit. Instead, they had helped forge humanity's first true alien alliance. And that would be their greatest mistake. The solar storm loomed ahead like a wall of fire, massive enough to make even the largest solar flares they used before look like candles next to a supernova. Commander Hannah Park watched the readings climb on the Starfire's main display, each number higher than anything she'd seen in her 15 years of space service. "Stormfront will reach the fleet's position in 17 minutes, Lieutenant Kim reported, his voice steady despite the tension. The hybrid pulse drive and phase shield systems hum throughout the ship, their combined frequencies creating a sound unlike anything human ears had heard before. Hundreds of ships stretched out before them, the largest fleet ever assembled in human history. Earth vessels flew alongside the crystalline ships of the Nairi, while other alien craft that had joined their alliance filled the space between. Each one carried the combined technology that had taken weeks of frantic work to perfect. "The Cordathi are responding to the storm," Officer Rayo announced. "They're reinforcing their barrier with additional power. Energy readings are off the scale." Of course they were reinforcing the barrier. The Cordathi had learned to fear what humanity could do with solar energy, but they hadn't realized that this time, the humans weren't alone. Dawn Singer's ship hung just off the Starfire's port side, its crystalline surface reflecting the approaching storm in ways that made it look like a living thing of light and shadow. "All Nairi vessels report phase shields at maximum capacity." The alien's voice came through clearly. "The modifications to your pulse drive designs are functioning perfectly." Hannah nodded, remembering the intense weeks of collaboration that had led to this moment. Human engineers working alongside Nairi technicians, combining technologies that had evolved on opposite sides of the galaxy. The result was something entirely new, weapons that could bend both energy and space itself. 5 minutes until optimal position, Kim updated. Storm intensity still increasing. Dr. Song's voice came through from engineering, where he monitored the hybrid systems. "The storm is perfect, stronger than anything we've seen, but following exactly the patterns we predicted. The Cordathi's barrier will be most vulnerable when the first wave hits." Hannah opened a channel to the entire fleet. "All ships, this is Commander Park. Move into attack formation. Remember your training. Time your strikes with your squadron leaders. We hit as one unified force." The fleet began to move, spreading out in a complex pattern that had taken days to calculate. Human ships formed the center, their pulse drives already beginning to glow with gathered energy. Nairi vessels took up positions on the flanks, their phase shields creating distortions in space that would help guide the combined attack. 3 minutes to optimal position, Kim called out. "Cordathi defensive fleet is moving to intercept." "Let them come," Hannah said calmly. "They're about to learn what happens when you unite the species you try to keep divided." The solar storm's leading edge reached them first, washing over the fleet in waves of energy that would have destroyed unshielded ships. But the hybrid shields held, absorbing and channeling the power in ways the Kordathi had never imagined possible. All ships power up primary weapons, Hana ordered. Synchronize targeting systems. The barrier will try to adapt. Hit it before it can. Status indicators turned green across her display as hundreds of ships reported ready. Human pulse drives sang in harmony with Nyari phase generators, creating a web of energy between the allied vessels. 30 seconds, Kim announced. The Kordathi ships were rushing to form a defensive line, but they were too late. Everything had been timed precisely with the storm's arrival. All vessels, Hana's voice carried across space to every ship in the fleet. Execute Operation Daybreak. The combined fleet struck as one. Pulse drives flared with the power of captured starlight, while phase shields bent space itself to focus the attack. The Kordathi barrier lit up as hundreds of weapons hit it simultaneously, their energy amplified by the raging solar storm. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The barrier absorbed the initial impact just as it had absorbed countless attacks before. Then the phase shields did their work, twisting the space around the point of impact in ways that made reality itself scream in protest. Energy cascade detected, Dr. Song shouted excitedly. The barrier is failing. The breaking point came with a flash that outshone the solar storm itself. The Kordathi barrier shattered, not just in one place, but everywhere at once, its energy matrix torn apart by forces it was never designed to resist. All ships, push through, Hana ordered. Don't let them regroup. The Allied fleet surged forward through the gaps, pulse drives and phase shields working together to keep the barrier from reforming. Kordathi ships scattered before them, their supposedly invincible defense stripped away. Multiple breaches confirmed, Kim reported, his voice tight with excitement. The barrier is completely down. I repeat, the blockade is broken. Cheers erupted across the bridge, echoed by similar celebrations throughout the fleet. Hana allowed herself a small smile as she watched the Kordathi ships retreat in disarray. Their greatest weapon had been turned against them, shattered by the very forces they had tried to control. Send word to Earth Command, she ordered. The path to Kordathi space is open. It's time for Phase 2. As the fleet regrouped for their next move, Hana looked out at the ships flying proudly alongside them, human and alien united against a common foe. The Kordathi had tried to divide them, to keep each species isolated and afraid. Instead, they had helped forge the strongest alliance the galaxy had ever seen. And this was just the beginning. The halls of the Kordathi High Council chamber stretched upward into darkness, their black walls seeming to absorb both light and hope. Commander Hana Park walked with measured steps, her dress uniform crisp despite the long journey. Behind her, representatives from Earth and their alien allies followed, a united front before the species that had tried to conquer them all. The Kordathi Supreme Council members loomed on their elevated platforms, their color-shifting forms making them look more like living oil slicks than solid beings. But there was no more arrogance in their postures. The destruction of their blockade and the routing of their fleet had shattered more than just their defenses. It had broken their myth of invincibility. You come before us as equals, the head counselor said, the word seeming to cause physical pain. Never in our history has this occurred. Times change, Hana replied simply. The galaxy is entering a new era. You can either be part of it or be left behind. She laid out the terms they had prepared. The Kordathi Empire would be dismantled, its conquered worlds freed. Trade routes would be open to all species. The technology that had kept them in power for so long would be shared, studied, and improved upon by the combined scientific minds of many races. You would destroy everything we have built, another counselor protested. Centuries of order and progress. Progress. Dawn Singer's crystalline form shimmered with controlled anger. You call subjugation progress. You isolated us from each other, stole our resources, blocked our advancement. And for what? To maintain your illusion of superiority. Hana held up a hand, calming her ally. We're not here to destroy. We're here to build something better. Something that benefits everyone, not just a single species. She activated a holographic display, showing the combined fleet that now orbited the Kordathi homeworld. Human ships flew alongside Nayari vessels, their hybrid technology a symbol of what cooperation could achieve. Other alien craft moved with them, each one representing a species that had broken free of Kordathi control. You have a choice, Hana continued. Accept these terms and join us as equals, or face the combined might of every race you've ever oppressed. And this time, you won't have your barrier to hide behind. The council chambers fell silent. The Kordathi had never faced a situation like this. Their entire society was built on the idea of their own superiority, their right to rule over lesser species. But that foundation had crumbled the moment humanity had shattered their blockade. We accept your terms, the head counselor finally said, their form dimming in what might have been shame. The negotiations that followed lasted for days, working out the details of dismantling an empire that had stood for centuries. But throughout it all, Hana felt a growing sense of achievement. They hadn't just won a war. They had changed the very nature of galactic civilization. Weeks later, the Starfire cruised through space near Earth, where fragments of the broken blockade still drifted like a reminder of what they had overcome. Lieutenant Kim stood at his usual station, monitoring the new trade ships that now moved freely through the solar system. It's strange, he said, watching vessels of various species passing by. A month ago, we were trapped in our own system. Now we're helping coordinate interstellar trade routes. Hana nodded, remembering the long journey that had brought them here. From the first appearance of the Kordathi ships to the moment they had shattered their barrier, humanity had refused to submit. And in doing so, they had gained not just their freedom, but allies and friends among the stars. The first joint human Mayari research facility opens next week, Dr. Song reported excitedly. Think of what we'll discover now that we can share knowledge freely. The bridge crew shared knowing looks. They had all seen how the combination of human ingenuity and alien wisdom had created something greater than either could achieve alone. Message from Earth Command, Officer Ryo announced. They're asking when we'll be ready to lead the first diplomatic mission to the outer colonies. Hana smiled, looking out at the stars that now represented not barriers or boundaries, but endless possibilities. The Kordathi had tried to cage humanity, to break their spirit. Instead, they had forced them to reach higher, to forge alliances that would reshape the galaxy. Tell them we'll be ready whenever they need us, she replied. After all, this is just the beginning. As the Starfire turned toward its next mission, Hana thought about how far they had come. They had proven themselves not just as survivors or warriors, but as unifiers, a species that could bring together others in common cause. The stars stretched out before them, no longer blocked by artificial barriers or ancient prejudices, and somewhere out there, new adventures waited. The next chapter in humanity's journey among the stars was just beginning to unfold. The impossible had been achieved, but for Commander Hana Park and her crew, for humanity and their new allies, the greatest discoveries still lay ahead. The stars were finally, truly free.